Hey guys, this is lesson 2.6 and you are going to learn how to estimate the percent of a number. So as I go through, I'm going to show you some tricks, and keep in mind for a lot of these problems you may do it differently and get an answer that's just as good. So my answer is just going to be one possible example. So let's start with example 1. It says estimate 47% of 692. Now the main thing we want you to be able to do is we want you to be able to change the numbers so that you can come up with an answer in your head. So let me show you what I mean. In the first one, I'm going to change 47% to 50% because I know 50% is half. Now if you know half of 692 in your head, go ahead and use it. That's a good estimate. But I think half of 700 is even easier. So my estimate will be 50%, or half of 700, which is 350. So 350 would be a pretty good estimate for example 1. Now for example 2, I'm actually going to do it a little differently than the book did, but you can always look at how the book did if you want to. So I'm going to cover this up and show you what I would do. Now the key thing is knowing that to find 10% of a number, you divide by 10. So for example 2, 60% of 27, I'm actually going to round 27 to 30. Here's why. First off, 10% of 30 is 3. Because remember, to find 10%, you divide by 10. Now, if 10% of 30 is 3, to find 60% of 30, well, 10 times 6 is 60%. 3 times 6 is 18. So 18 would be a pretty good estimate. So remember, if you can find 10% of a number, you can find 20%, 30%, 40% just by multiplying. All right, why don't we go down and we'll do a couple problems together down below. Now, if you want to, you are welcome to, let me see if I can get rid of some of this stuff. Sorry. If you want to, these sometimes drive me nuts. You can go and do A, B, and C on your own and then come back and watch. Or you could do A, B, and C with me. So, as I do A, here's what I'm going to do. First off, I'm going to change 48% to 50%, which is half. Now, if you could do half of 76 in your head, use that as your estimate, because that's going to be good. If not, you want to change the 76 to about 80, because half of 80 is 40, and 40 would be an easy, pretty close estimate. Now in B, 18% of 42, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change both numbers. 18% is close to 20%, and 42 is close to 40. So, remember my 10% trick. To find 10% of 40, you just divide 40 by 10, which is 4. So if 10% of 40 is 4, 20% would be 4 times 2, which is 8. So 8 would be a good estimate. All right, and for C, you could do the 10% trick again. So let's say we change 73% to 70%, and 41 to 40. So remember, 10% of 40 is 4. You just divide by 10, right? So to go to 70%, you would multiply by 7. So 70% of 40 would be 28. And 28 would be a pretty good estimate. I am going to show you one other way, maybe this makes more sense to you, is this. If you know 73% is close to 75%, and 75% is 3/4, you could find 75% of 40 pretty easily, because 1/4 of 40 is 10, so 3/4 of 40 would be 30. So that would be another good estimate. Remember, I had 28 before, so they're both pretty good. All right, on the next page. Example 3 is just more of a real-world problem. So we'll read it, and then we'll go over it, how you might estimate your answer. Now, as I read it, I want you to think, why is this an estimating problem? Is there a word or words or phrase that would tell you it's estimating? You ready? It says, polar bears can eat as much as 10% of their body weight in less than 1 hour. If an adult male polar bear weighs 715 pounds, about how much food can he eat in 1 hour? So, why do you think it's going to be estimating? Did you see this word here? About. That's a good hint sometimes that you're going to be estimating a problem. So we need to figure out about how much 10% of a 715 polar bear is. So here's what I would do. First off, I am not going to change that 10% to anything, because remember, to find 10%, you just divide by 10. And I am going to change 715 to 700, because that's easy to divide by 10 with. And if I do that, 10% of 700 is 70 pounds. So in less than an hour, that polar bear could eat about 70 pounds of food. All right, let's go down to another one here. Let me get rid of that box. Okay, want to try D? So I'm going to give you an option. If you think you can do D by yourself, pause it, do it by yourself, and restart it. If you want to do it with me, do it with me. All right, but I'm going to start. So D says, Kaylee decided to donate 30% of her savings. If she has $238 in savings, about how much will she donate? Well, she's going to donate 30% of her $238, right? And it said about how much will she donate, so we're going to estimate that. Now, I'm going to do, since 30% is a nice multiple of 10, I'm going to do the 10% rule for this one. So first off, let's round 238 to 240. We want a nicer number. And to find 30% of 240, I'm first going to find 10% of 240. And remember, that just means divide by 10. And divide 240 by 10 and you get 24. So that's 10%. So to change that to 30%, I'm going to multiply that by 3. And 24 times 3 is 72. So she's going to donate about $72. Now, if you did it a different way and your answer is pretty close to 72, I'm sure it's going to be fine. All right. In this next section, there's kind of a different way to estimate. And this is kind of a cool trick. But in order for this to work, the number you're taking from must be close to a multiple of 100. Remember, multiples of 100 are just counting by 100 numbers, 100, 200, 300, etc. So watch how this works. I'm going to change 198 to 200 because it's a multiple of 100. Now here's what we should know. 17%, I don't even have to change that. So 17% of 100 is 17 because percent means out of 100. So I don't really have to do any math there. So if 17% of 100 is 17, to find 17% of 200, I would just multiply that by 2 and get 34. So that would be a pretty good estimate. See what I did? I found 17% of 100 and doubled it to get 17% of 200. Okay, let's look at the next page. I have another example here. It's going to be somewhat similar, and then we're going to have you guys try some problems. In example 5, it says, an airline records the snack orders of passengers. Last year, 9% of all passengers ordered ginger ale to drink. There are 408 passengers on a flight to Houston, Texas. About how many passengers does the airline to expect to order ginger ale? Well, we know 9% of passengers drink ginger ale, so 9% of the 408 passengers should drink ginger ale, but it says about, so we're going to estimate. Now, you could change 9% to 10%, but you don't really have to for this one. Watch. Remember, 408 is really close to a multiple of 100, 400. And 9% of 400, well, this won't be too hard. Because if you can find 9% of 100, which is 9, 9% of 400 would be 9 times 4, which is 36. So about 36 passengers should drink ginger ale. All right. Now, here's what we're going to do. The last practice ones you're going to do with me are E, F, and G. Now, again, I'll give you the option. It would be better if you want to try E, F, and G by yourself and then watch the video if you get stuck or just to check your answers. But if you want for these, you can do these with me if you're still not 100% sure, because I know estimating can be tricky. All right. Anyway, pause it if you're going to do it on your own. If not, I'm about to start. So let's look at problem E, 20%, 7% of 307. So for this one, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change 307 to 300. Now, I'm going to change 27% to 25%, and the only reason is because it's easier to multiply 25. Because think of quarters. 25, 50, 75, 100. You're used to counting quarters. So, remember, 25% of 100 was 25. So 25% of 300 is 25 times 3, or 75. So 75 would be a pretty good estimate for E. Now, if you kept it 27% and you did 27% of 100 is 27 and multiplied it by 3, you would have 81, and that's still good. All right, how about B, 76% of 192? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to change that to 200. And I could find 76% of 100 and then multiply it by 2, if you could do that in your head. But if not, let's say you want easier numbers. Just round that to 80%, because 80% is easier to work with. So 80% of 100 is 80. So 80% of 200, multiply that by 2, is 160. Now, if you kept it 76, you would have 152, and that's a good estimate. All right, last one. It says last year, 24% of zoo visitors were under the age of 3. Let me circle that. Last week, the zoo had 996 visitors. About how many of the zoo visitors were under the age of 3? Well, here's what we know. 24% of the 996 visitors should be under the age of 3. So we're estimating this one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change 996 to 1,000, because 1,000 is a multiple of 100. And I'm actually going to keep this 24%. I'm not going to mess with it. You could change it to 25 if you want, but you'll see why I'm going to keep it. So the first thing I'm going to do is find 24% of 100, which is just 24. Now, if 24% of 100 is 24, that means 24% of 1,000 is going to be 10 times bigger. So 24 times 10 is 240. So of those visitors, about 240 visitors should be under the age of 3. All right, that's it for me. If you were absent, you're going to have some problems below to work on. But I'm done. If you need help, ask me and I'll help you out. Thanks, guys.